Good night it is now, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, and members of the media, let me thank you for coming out as late. We've had a marathon session from 10 o'clock this morning with respect to a number of stakeholders, ministries, departments, agencies, who, as you know, were brought together by the Ministry of Education to allow us to be able to discuss difficulties that we were encountering in the school system with respect to both violence between students and teachers generally, and then also to be able to discuss the state of the school plan, because as you know, we are just about 5 to 6 weeks away from the end of the school term, and to that extent there has to be absolute certainty as to how we can make a difference to the quality of that plan. The agencies that were attending today and the ministers ranged from those responsible for people empowerment and elderly affairs, so that the social work and welfare agencies, Ministry of Youth Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Culture and Creative Economy, Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, Attorney General's Office, Commissioner of Police, Chief of Staff, and all of the individual departmental heads. From the unions, of course, we had all of the representative bodies, Barbados Union of Teachers, Association of Public Primary Schools, the Barbados Association of Public School Principals, BAPS and APS. APS being the primary and BAPS being the secondary. And of course the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, so that all of the major stakeholders have been present at LASC today from 10 o'clock this morning. It has been a long day, and we will not solve this country's problems within the system in one day. But we believe that we can make a start and we can have the kind of intervention. And I want to thank the Minister of Education and Vocational Training, Santia Bradshaw, for facilitating this meeting, along with all of our staff who came prepared, along with the unions, with a stock of data that has allowed us to take some of the decisions. The conversation, however, will continue. But the key decisions that we've taken build on, in fact, some earlier meetings that we had. And I'm sorry that the Attorney General is representing the government at a meeting in Washington, D.C., but were he here with us, he would tell you that we started this process when we met between the national security agencies and the police and the social and welfare agencies, including the Ministry of Education, some 6-7 weeks ago. And therefore, we don't start from ground zero today. We have agreed all, without exception, that there must be a national mission to save the 500 most vulnerable families across Barbados, from St. Lucie to St. Philip and Christchurch in the south, from the east to the west, parish by parish, and that there will be a framework determined by the social workers to allow us to identify who those most vulnerable of families are, that audit will also be complemented by information coming from the principals, as well as those who are already in the criminal justice system as young people, invariably below the age of majority, and that audit of those families will then allow us to intervene across every sectoral entity, be it the welfare department, be it the child care board, be it the Ministry of Education, be it the Ministry of Youth Affairs, be it the Ministry of Small Business, be it working with the stakeholders in the social partnership to help position them for training or jobs, but recognizing that this process is probably going to be embarked on initially over the next 18 months or so, but it will take at least 5 to 7 years to move a particular family from a point of dependence to a point of independence to a point of giving back to the society. In other words, removing the intergenerational aspects of poverty. Minister King said it better perhaps than anyone else in here today, that he worked at the government industrial school and that he worked there from 1983 to 91, and then he went back in 2012, and that when he went back in 2012 he was meeting the children of people whom he had dealt with in the late 80s, early 90s. This is the kind of intergenerational poverty that we are trying to break once and for all. Part of the difficulty of the last decade is that prior to 10 years ago, we could have said that poverty in Barbados was really not the absence of economic opportunity, but as a result of social difficulties and disabilities, abuse, afflictions, different things. But regrettably, to that has been added yet again absence of economic opportunity. We need to work to make people realize that poverty must not be a state of mind, even if it is a state of economic difficulties. And therefore, collectively, we believe we can work with the stakeholders in the community, the churches, the NGOs, the groups that have not been formed in recent years as they were before, to be able to help us in the effort. If we can save each family, then each family will save their own. And as a result, it is for us to be able to save these families to help us save the most at risk. There is no doubt that there has to be a reinforcement of the moral compass. People must know what is right and what is wrong. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And there's no two ways of mixing up what is right and what is wrong. Simply put as well, we have come and agreed, as have other heads of government in the region recently, following the WHO from years ago, that violence is a public health risk, a public health condition that we have to fight, and that we have a duty as a nation to condition violence out of the next generation. We cannot talk about wanting to be part of a Caribbean region that is a zone of peace and want to remove violence and war and afflictions that are related to that from across the region, but we're not removing it from our households, from our communities, from our public spaces. We must work together as a people to condition violence out of people's heads and to remind people that they have choice. And you have a choice as to how you respond to people, how you talk to people, what you do if you're angry, what you do if you're sad, what you do if you're disappointed. And in a very real sense, maturity as an adult comes in understanding that life is about choice and that choices have consequences. And we have very often to take time to reinforce this in our young people, in our children, because many of them, after the act, can be heard weeping and not realizing that had I not done this, I wouldn't be here, and worrying and crying after. So the first major intervention, therefore, is in a total national approach to save the most vulnerable 500 families across the nation. How is it going to be done? It's not an arbitrary number. We've agreed that we will start with 30 families in each of the least populous parishes, from St. Lucie right back down to all except Christchurch, St. James, St. Philip, where we will do 50 each, and in St. Michael, where we will do 100 because of the populous nature. That brings us to roughly about 460, and then we felt that there would be others that might crop up over the course and conduct of the management of this affairs, and hence we round it off for our budgeting purposes at 500. The second thing that we have agreed today to do is that we have made available sums of money, not starting today, but starting at the end of the last fiscal year. Many of you would have heard me speak to it in the estimates, that we were deliberately putting aside for this financial year money to train young people in sports and cultural activity, to be able to help them find passion in things that they are not now doing, such that they can go into the communities and that they can look to form groups again. We want them to be able also, separate from the sports and cultural training, for us to be able to do so with respect to the Sea Cadets that we've agreed to give money to the Barbados Defence Force, $1.5 million there. The sports and cultural training is $2.5 million each to NCF and Sports Council, and also to the Prince's Trust and to other civic organizations like the Nature Fund Ranch that are making a significant difference in how they are training and keeping structured activity for young people who are not now involved in any kind of group activity. This is without prejudice to us working in the schools, and Santia will speak more about that, with other private sector agencies like Supreme Counseling, who will be more working in schools as opposed to the what I call structured after-school activity, that people must have passion beyond school, and that there must be something that keeps them engaged and involved. If not, they will find themselves going to other activities. What they say? That the devil finds work for who? Idle hands. The third thing, and most importantly, is that we will create another day facility for now, but ultimately to morph into a residential facility to allow us to be able to concentrate in a focused way on those young people who are most at risk and who for the moment are being disruptive influences in the schools which they attend. There's a very touching voice note that the minister shared with me with a young girl who can't be any more than 11 or 12, making a strong appeal to her and saying, Auntie Santia, I'm begging, there are those of us who really just want to learn in the classes, and we're not being given a chance, and the way in which some of these children are treating the teachers and disrupting the class cannot work. If this was just a normal situation, you might debate it. There can be no tolerance. I want to repeat myself. There can be no tolerance in this country for any child to believe that they are in a position to threaten or to attack any teacher or even their parents or any adult in this country. If we allow this to happen, we will be surrendering our country to lawlessness at a very, very wrong time, and to young people who will not come to appreciate that their behavior is unacceptable in every form. And to that extent, therefore, there will be a zero tolerance policy towards those who believe that they can threaten teachers in the system. The problem is that the system is not now structured to be able to work with and assist, because more often than not, just because it has happened doesn't make the child incapable of correction or incapable of being worked with again. But more often than not, you need to do so in a dedicated situation that allows you to unlock what is the source of this disrespect for authority, or what is the source of this anger, or that this reckless behavior that has caused the child to behave in this way. To that extent, the government will work immediately to create what was always intended to be an appropriately scaled residential facility to move and build upon the work of Edna Nichols, which I'm told the Edna Nichols Center is now stretched and therefore will require an additional review. But since the Edna Nichols Center, there have also been private sector institutions like Supreme Counseling that have come on board and that can work cooperatively. Because the one thing you don't want to do is to send a child on suspension and then they remain at home or in the community doing nothing. And the Edna Nichols Center was established to be able to take that child and to understand what was at the core of their indisciplined or deviant behavior, and can we get to the bottom of it. And if we can't, then we need this other facility that goes beyond the 3 weeks that the Edna Nichols Center may keep the child with an additional expansion of only one 3-week session. This entity that we will create has to be done in stages. The government has agreed that immediately within the next 2 weeks that we will pull together a group of persons, some of whom we have started to speak to today already, who will help us manage the process of helping to stabilize, understand, and educate these children who are most at risk and who are exhibiting these difficulties in behavior. On a parallel track, the Ministry of Education will settle the policy paper that will inform drafting instructions for the Attorney General such that we can turn this institution into a residential facility that will take 2 types of people. One, those children where the parents are requesting urgent intervention, in which case the consent of the parents is given, so you don't need a legislative framework. And those where the society, through the chief education officer, in the absence of the parents' consent, has come to the conclusion with the principal and other social workers and psychologists' reports that there is need for intervention. This is not a case of anybody with a conviction going to Dodds or the government industrial school. This is a case to try and prevent them from ever going to Dodds or government industrial school. But that, as an eminent social worker once said, it is easier to bend a boy than to break a man. And therefore we have to be able to put the legislative framework that allows the chief education officer to apply to the courts to act in loco parentis, in the place of the parents, to be able to have that child be subjected to some level of stay within a residential facility, be it 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, once the residential facility is built out. In the immediate day facility, before it becomes that, before we have the legislation, we've agreed to work with the Barbados Defense Force, who will make available immediately the space and facilities to supplement the work of the other day facility that the Ministry of Education currently runs, which is the New Horizons Academy. But that academy, I'm instructed, has in fact reached its limits, and therefore we are going to parallel the 2 types of facilities, one that will have clearly a far more rigorous discipline boot camp-like approach, and the other one being the continued efforts of the New Horizons Academy. This is a case at all stages of us bringing all hands on deck. And if there is a single message that must come out of today's meeting, is that not just in the public sector, not just in the labor movement and the NGOs, but across the entire country, from parents to grandparents to churches to cricket clubs, football clubs, sporting clubs, cultural organizations, all hands must be on deck. And all of us are required to give back if we are to take back. And what we are taking back is the future of our young people. By all evidence, it is not an astronomically large number of people. Indeed, it is probably less than a few hundred. The particular schools that we are talking about, the numbers provided by the principals, we are talking about less than 200 kids at the moment. But that does not mean that it does not require the most urgent and critical intervention. And I'm happy that we speak with one voice today across all sectors and from all perspectives. There is the additional commitment by the police that has been given, and the BDF, that they will increase the patrolling in the areas, and the evidence and the research done by the Ministry of Education has been comprehensive. And Santia, I would like to thank your officers publicly, and also the welfare agencies who have started some of the work since the early meeting, Cynthia. I want to thank everybody, the public officials, because we could not make quick action today on some of these things had there not actually been preliminary work being done for the last 6 to 8 weeks. And in the case of your officials, Santia, I think theirs has been in the case of a couple of years. But one of the things that came out clearly from the research was that if you leave people unsupervised, if you leave children unsupervised, you are going to get these problems. More parents are working today than perhaps were working 30, 40, 50 years ago. There's a notion of what people would call in the old days latchkey children. Children who have their own keys, they go home, they're unsupervised. They're unsupervised in the bus stands. They're unsupervised as the time they leave school and they get into the buses. Santia will brief you as to the other posts that we've agreed to create at the request of her ministry. But what we will do, separate from what is done at the schools, and in addition to the work of the safety officers and the truant officers, the police and the BDF, who are doing a lot more joint patrolling across the country since the beginning of the year, will increase their patrols outside of the schools, along the routes that the children are passing, and in the bus terminals, because we will have a zero tolerance to indiscipline. Now, just because, and we made this point earlier today, that in many instances, even where the police become involved, we appeal to parents that charging is not the first option for young people. There's a juvenile liaison scheme. It is intended for us to work with young people and give them a chance. It is only where young people are either resistant to being talked to, or that the crime that has been committed is so serious that there is absolutely no way to avoid public charging, that we go there as a first option. But how many of us can think of people who along the way might have fallen or might have veered, and who a stern conversation or an intervention by others have made the difference to them being productive citizens or falling from the wayside? We must not at all lose the mercy that lies within our bosom and the milk of human kindness. Our children are not adults. And that is why they need guidance. And that is why they need mentorship. And that is why they need a firm hand. And that is why they need love. But tough love is often necessary to ensure that they do not fall off the straight and narrow path. The resources of the Ministry of Finance will be made available to be able to facilitate this core framework of actions. And my office has given its blessings to work across the multiple ministries, be it public service, be it finance, be it public works, be it the social ministries that I referred to just now, be it the Ministry of Environment. And Santia will speak to things that are too easy for us to resolve, and mercifully our ministry is taking the lead on it, like the Kowich and Trevor, and they'll talk about that separately. But these things are humbugs that ought not to be humbugs. And the real things that need our attention are the things to which I just spoke. The last point I'll make before handing to Santia is, as I said, we will make available financial resources for the school improvement and repairs program over the course of the summer. Part of the difficulty of doing repairs in the educational system is that you really only have finite periods to make it happen, because obviously you can't do heavy repairs on plant, on site, with children and teachers and other people functioning. But we will add an additional amount to the primary school summer program, so that the amount voted in the estimates of 3.5 will now go to 5.5 million. And roughly about 4.5 of that will be spent on the summer program, and the rest is spent for small repairs during the year, because a pipe may burst or something may happen that requires urgent repairs. So you always keep an amount to cover you for the rest of the year. And then in the secondary school system, we have an amount of another $7 million, 2 of which was given in supplementary for general schools, and another 5 this year, which makes 7, and then another $2 million for what we call the toilet replacement program. And we've determined that in the very most, there got to be some things that we have to have a zero tolerance to physically as well. and not just the violence. But we have to have a zero tolerance to some of the bathroom facilities in public spaces that we have, that we are requiring people to use, and they're using them at the time when the public health risk to them will be greatest. It cannot continue. It is not good enough, and we have to set new standards as to what is acceptable. You can't use a household toilet and hope that it can handle commercial pressure. It's not going to work. And therefore, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for the bathrooms clogging up. You're setting yourself up to put janitors to work in conditions that are unfair to them. And therefore, the government has determined, as I felt long ago, and I'm happy to make it happen now, that we will invest this $2 million to start a phase of the replacement of all of the toilet facilities in secondary and primary schools over the next few years with industrial, commercial toilets that will allow us to be able, first, to be able to handle the pressure on a plant that has 600, 700, 800, 900 people, and secondly, that allows us to be able to allow the janitors to do their job more efficiently by tiling, and paving common areas and tiling within the bathroom facilities. Because what happens is that if you have grimy concrete that is uneven, the grime and all of the dirt stays in one place and the place starts to look nasty. The second major thing, and ironically when I saw the study today, I smiled because it talks about the design of facilities and the pathways and all of these other things that contribute to opportunities for violence. And we've determined that there are too many of some of our schools that are just simply too dark. And darkness does not admit of an atmosphere to want to learn, and that we need ventilation and light in some of them. And if you know them well, they're these aluminum windows that, they're all the old World Bank schools. And the design, regrettably, was not really suited for the tropics, if you ask me. So we're going to need to replace out those windows and to create space and air and ventilation and light in those classrooms. And we're doing that in a phased way. We're starting, I think, with 3 schools. Parkinson Secondary, Grantley Adams, and Graydon Sealy to start with immediately this summer. And we will continue to do it as we can. We recognize that in addition to that, as I said, that the toilet program will span beyond the summer and not just in the summer, because that is a function of the delivery of the equipment that is necessary for us to do it. All in all, therefore, there is a commitment to spend equivalent of just about $4 million at the primary, $4 to $4.5 at the primary million, and at the secondary it is going to be another $9 million, 7 generally, and then $2 million in the toilet replacement program. So 11 million over the summer, and the other 2 million on a parallel track from the summer onwards on the toilet replacement program. These are the broad strategic interventions that we are going to take to help both from the issue of violence as well as the quality of the school plan that is impairing the ability for students to learn and teachers to teach. And we believe that the persons, and let us also be clear that the ancillary staff are a critical component of children developing the social and emotional development that they need in order to be able to function. So we're not only focusing on teachers, but we're going to work with the ancillary staff. We recognize as well that in many instances, people are not told what is expected of them, both on the school plan and off, and therefore we want to work with them so that everybody is on the same page. And I'm confident that the institutions that are here will work with us to have their members put persons on the same page so that each school has a mission and each person in that school understands what their purpose and what their mission is so that we can get there. Will we have perfection? Probably not. But what we will have is a focused approach to being able, 1, to reduce the level of violence, and 2, to be able to improve the numbers seeking to learn within our school system. I'd like to ask Santia, therefore, to address some of these things, but end simply by reminding you this cannot solve all of the structural problems in an evening, and the conversations will continue as to how we will change what I have termed as an unjust transfer system from primary to secondary, how we are going to deal with something that we settled in the Ministry of Education, 20 years ago, a national diploma for secondary education so people don't walk out without certificates, whether we need to buttress up and have a functioning and expanding youth service, but these are things that require conversation from St. Lucie to St. Philip and cannot be solved at the LASC on a Saturday, however long the meeting is. Santia, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. I want to first start by thanking you and certainly thanking all stakeholders for being here today. Particular thanks to you, though, for facilitating this meeting. We've been talking over the past couple of weeks about the state of the school plans, the issues in education. For me, there has been almost 2 decades of reports after reports indicating the challenges with children at risk, with the state of the school plans, the improvements that needed to be made. I believe that on coming to office, we all recognized at Cabinet that this was a major issue in relation to education. It affects almost every single constituency, every single representative. We have had to grapple on coming to office as well with limited resources, and I know that as a Cabinet we've had to struggle with applying those resources in a very efficient way and a very prudent way. That said, I'm glad that today you have made the announcement, Madam Prime Minister, that additional resources will be applied to the school plans. In the course of the last few months, I've been repeatedly speaking to the union representatives about the state of the plant, the environmental issues. It has been of concern to me, it has been of concern to members in the Ministry of Education. We take no pleasure in having to close schools. We take no pleasure in having to address issues of whether it is cowage or whether it is issues of mold as a result of a number of our old buildings. We take no pleasure in having to close schools because of environmental issues with teachers becoming sick or students becoming sick. And it has become very frustrating to have to operate as a minister in an environment which is, for the most part, unhealthy and unsafe for the persons with whom certainly I have to represent and I have to interface on a daily basis. And I'm glad that through the Ministry of Finance that we've been able to find the resources to be able to apply to what I consider to be a critical area. The ability to apply these resources, I know, will go a long way in, I believe, settling the union's base, certainly the teachers and the students. It is going to go a long way, particularly because over the course of the past few years, this amount of funds has not been applied to the respective summer programs and certainly applied to the interventions that were needed in relation to the plants. And as you correctly said, the fact is that much more funds are needed, but we have started the process in terms of being able to address and to prioritize the areas that we consider to be critical and most urgent. On coming to office, I would have asked for the IDB to intervene to do a facilities audit of the secondary schools, again, in recognition of the problem. Fortunately, we've had that presented to us just last week when the IDB was here on a visit. So we have that in our possession, at least the first phase, which hopefully over the next few years, Cabinet would be able, and certainly yourself and Ministry of Finance would be able to look at being able to obtain additional funding to help to improve the school plans in that area, and certainly at the primary level. But today, I think we have been able to outline, we've been able to outline to the unions, again, for probably the first time in a number of years, the problems that confront the Ministry of Education in a more holistic way. I believe that there has to be consultation, deep consultation with the stakeholders. Sometimes ignorance and a lack of information has often gotten the better of the dialogue that has existed, and I believe that we have to start to put that to rest. We are in this together, and as the Prime Minister correctly said, we have a responsibility to do this for the benefit of all the persons who work within education, but as a society, we have a responsibility to our citizens to get these issues in education correct. I think apart from health, this is the other ministry that impacts tremendously on almost everyone in the population, and therefore I think there should be no jealousy in relation to the allocation of funds to assist this particular area and to get the ball moving in relation to these funds. We would have done presentations today, which I think also would have painted the picture of the state of the school plans. I've asked the unions to be able to continue to interface with us and share information as it relates to problems as they pop up across the system. We don't have a perfect system in the Ministry of Education, but we're working on it. We have had a situation over the past few years where the members, the officers have been responsive to emergency situations. And certainly these funds are going to help us to be able to put more preventative systems in place as opposed to constantly using resources to just simply respond to emergencies. And I think that is very critical. I've listened to the unions, I've listened to my other colleagues in terms of the concerns that they've had in their respective constituencies in the school plans. And I believe that while ambitious to spend the monies that you have afforded us, I give you the assurance and certainly to the country that we will use all best efforts to ensure that those funds are applied as efficiently and expeditiously as we possibly can. It also heartens me to have had the opportunity to have a wider dialogue with the amount of stakeholders that we've had today. It's not just been the unions and primary school principals and secondary school principals, but also the Royal Barbados Police Force, the Cadet Corps. We've also had non-governmental organizations, Supreme Counseling, Corey Lane from the Fun Ranch, and all of the stakeholders who've been a part of this. I believe it just shows, the level at which we need to now continue to operate. The Ministry of Education cannot do it alone. We have to rely on other agencies and all of the stakeholders in order to address a number of the issues in education. And as the Prime Minister correctly said, we will be having continued stakeholder meetings such as this. This being the first of I guess you would have to call it a committee, and a standing committee to be able to continue to consult on issues related to education. Today, we have only been able to address or touch the surface of the number of issues that are certainly on the agenda, not just for the ministry and the union, but I think for all stakeholders. But I think we have basically been able to make some headway in relation to those important issues as it relates to the school plans and environmental issues and as it relates to the issue of violence. And I'm grateful to those stakeholders who have already reached out and said that they are willing to work with us. There have been so many reports in the Ministry of Education as to the things that we need to do, whether it's in relation to residential care facility, whether it's in relation to dealing with children at risk. The time now is for us to put those proposals into action. We don't need any more reports. We have been, I think, and I think all stakeholders would agree, we know what it is that have to be done. And I think the commitment here today is that all hands are on deck with a mission to be able to ensure that the things that we know need to be done get done. So I just really want to thank all of the stakeholders for their input. I think we've had a very productive session, a very cordial session. Exchange of information. We were able to identify the schools that we consider, and I think that was perhaps for me the greatest test, to identify the schools where we need to have the greatest intervention right now, and to be able to work now together to develop those programs to address those problems. Given that the Ministry of Finance had limited resources, I can say to you as well that the ministry has been working over the past few months with other non-governmental organizations such as UNICEF and also the Maria Holder Memorial Trust to assist the ministry in putting in place some programs to deal with children at risk. But as the Prime Minister would have rightly said, the numbers are a couple hundred that we're talking about in the system that are disrupting or students who want to learn from being able to learn. But it has to be an approach now that is holistic, one that is, an approach that really allows the interventions that are necessary to be strengthened across the system. And I think we've identified where those issues are, where we need to strengthen, and I think all stakeholders have agreed what they have to do in order to be able to assist the process forward. So from the ministry's end, come September, I know that we will have the safety officers in place that the government would have introduced and created a post for in recent months. We will also have additional guidance counselors going into the schools that we have agreed are giving and presenting the most problems in terms of children at risk, which will now give the complement in those schools at 2. We expect that our safety officers, apart from being able to identify students in the terminals and on the making their way to school and to make sure that they are attending school, that those officers will also be able to work very closely with the guidance counselors in the secondary schools to fill in the gaps where they are necessary throughout the school day. It is intended as well that in the primary schools we will also have additional social workers going in for the first time, because as I think most people would agree, nobody becomes deviant at the age of 16. The patterns have shown that the signs are often there at the primary school level, sometimes even manifesting at the nursery school level, and it is really a situation where we have to start and to deal with these issues at the root cause. I want to also make a call to parents, because it is clear that teachers alone, principals and person administrators in educational institutions only have students for a certain number of hours during the school day within that 24-hour period. It therefore means that parents also have a responsibility to work hand in hand with the educational system to ensure that students are not disruptive in the system, to be able to identify or to ask for assistance where they believe that children are going off track. And also, obviously, the schools have a responsibility to be able to assist in the ministry, to be able to assist with the interventions that may be necessary to assist those children to get through their career in school. Now, what I would implore of parents to do is to help to support the parent-teachers associations. I think it is critical that we don't point fingers. This is not a finger-pointing exercise, but I think it is high time that parents also step up to the plate. I've heard today a number of the concerns from principals as it relates to the lack of attendance of certainly parents, throughout the entire student life of a student. It is high time that we don't only pay attention when the children have gone into secondary school, or when it's around the exam, or when it is around the third form year, when you're making choices in terms of going on to specialize for your fourth and fifth form. It is now time for parents to pay attention to students and to their charges on a regular basis. We will work from the Ministry of Education's end and with the commitment of all of the stakeholders to assist parents with the interventions that are needed. But we can only do the interventions if we know what the problems are. And we can only deploy resources if we understand what the problems are. So where there may need to be a relaxing from the school's end in terms of when we meet, I believe from what has come out of the discussions today, I think there's that understanding and that flexibility to assist in that department. But it also requires that parents have to have a level of communication with the schools that allow them to understand exactly what is happening. The Barbados Secondary Teachers Union has indicated some protocols that they would wish us to consider. I am grateful to them for putting those together. I know the BUT as well has indicated and shared with us on several occasions their concerns as well as it relates to the issue of violence in schools. Let me just say, for the avoidance of any doubt, that the Ministry of Education, certainly me as Minister, has a zero tolerance to violence. Violence in all forms. That is student-on-student violence, teacher-on-student violence, student-on-teacher violence. It doesn't matter what form it comes in, I am intolerant to it. And I therefore implore that, as the Prime Minister asked us to do, to look at the catchphrase that we would have used in the anti-violence campaign, and we utter this as we go about our business as the new mantra in education: violence solves nothing, talk it out. That was what we went into the schools and we told our students. That is what we're about to embark on with the second phase of the anti-violence campaign in the primary school system as well. Violence solves nothing, talk it out. And I ask that that message be continued to be echoed at every opportunity, from principals, from teachers, from the unions, from the Ministry of Education, from all of the stakeholders, that people understand that we must have a zero tolerance approach to this issue of violence. It is the one thing that, as the Prime Minister has stated, has to be treated as a public health issue. And we all understand the implications of persons feeling threatened when students, engage in such behavior. We understand it, but we also understand that there are root causes for persons acting out. And it means that we have to sometimes pause and try to get the assistance that is necessary for the most vulnerable and the children who are at risk. And therefore, I would want to again thank all the stakeholders for the candid manner in which we have been able to speak today to address a number of these issues. It will not be certainly the last consultation. This, I believe, will become now the standard moving forward, where we have this continued discourse, certainly in the Ministry of Education. And we will at some point be addressing the issue of examinations, which we discussed as well today, because I feel that that is obviously another burning issue which has been impacting on children who present with these problems of being at risk. If you are not able to read, or you're not able to write properly, it does have an impact on your ability to settle in the school environment. And the ministry is taking steps to deal with issues of literacy, certainly issues of numeracy, to strengthen, the support systems. We've said today that we will also reach out to some of the retired educators in the system to be able to engage them in a program where they can also give back as well to some of the students as well. So as the Prime Minister said, this is a all hands on deck approach. That we are imploring all participants, including the students, to come on board, to recognize that violence solves nothing, and we need to talk it out and get back to the business of education. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I hand over to the other stakeholders, I really want to thank you, Santia, and to say that you must know that we are proud that in spite of your challenges, you continue to work with us to help fight off these very grave and difficult circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, who wants to start? Charles?
Good evening. During the course of the discussion today, there's been much dialogue on a range of topics, and among them we have discussed a strategic and purposeful plan to address the issues of maintenance and environmental, as well as infrastructural challenges which arise in schools. To this end, we look forward to the inspection and the maintenance schedules which have been proposed, and we look forward to them being done in good time, in good stead, and in good faith. Of course, our members in the primary, nursery, secondary, tertiary, as well as the special needs schools would look forward very much to this. It should provide some measure of comfort for them as they go about their day-to-day activities in the course of delivering instruction. Much has been also said of the habitual incidents of deviant, unruly, and indisciplined behavior, as well as the incidents of violence in the schools. What we have managed to do today is to arrive at a consensus with respect to those incidents and to that matter. Of course, our schools must be safe spaces, and they must be spaces for learning and teaching primarily, as they have been meant to be. What we have also come to understand is that we have to be careful where we are looking at the number of students on the rolls of respective schools. Overcrowding has been seen as having a corollary with the incidence of violence and indiscipline in the schools, and we would mostly be looking to see how that will be remedied in a few years to come. We have also discussed the matter of standardized testing with reference to the common interest examination, the criterion reference test, and the like. And as we have seen, in some cases, deficits in those areas are presented when we look at the analysis. But the bigger problem we are identifying here is that there's very little transfer of information as students go from primary to secondary schools. having an academic profile by way of a score in the common entrance does not always give us the best information in terms of what that child truly represents beyond the scope of academics. Many of these students have a skill set which is not treated to in the exam, be it sporting, be it science, or anything of that sort. What it also speaks to is the fact that we can do is some expansion of the programs afforded after school, etc., for these students. What I would like to also speak to is the fact that we are now looking to have provisions for persons who have retired to give back to the teaching fraternity and the students at large. What I would also like to see is that the members of the BUT who would happen to possess academic training, academic qualifications, and possess training in the areas of psychology, social work, guidance, and counseling, be given the opportunity, those who are so desirous, to actually put into practice these competencies which they possess. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. I am Juanita Wade, President of the Barbados Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools. I do want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister and the Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training for convening this meeting. On behalf of BAPS, I want to say that it has been a very productive meeting. It has been solutions-oriented. Certainly, our principals will be satisfied that every effort is being made to provide the support to ensure that our schools are safe havens for the teachers and for the students and all who work within the vicinities. We are sure that we're going to have increased learning and teaching under circumstances now where we will have avenues for dealing with our challenges where they relate specifically to violence. Of course, we're also very grateful to hear about the improvements to the infrastructure, because obviously the more comfortable everyone is, the more productivity we can expect to have from them. We're happy to hear that the dialogue will continue, and we expect that we will be a part of it. I also want to say that it has been quite a learning experience this afternoon. We've had the opportunity to interact with the unions. I'm hoping that going forward, we're going to have a lot more cooperation where that's concerned. I'm sure that that's what's going to happen. I'm holding BSTU and BUT to that, and of course, APS as well. And we're thinking that really, with this sort of relationship going on, that it can only augur well for education in Barbados, and obviously that is what we all want. So I really want to say thank you very much for inviting us. We look forward to the next phase.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
I should like to echo the sentiments of the President of BAPS in relation to thanking you, Prime Minister, and especially the Minister of Education, for this opportunity. This is certainly an about turn in relation to the type of relationship that has existed before, and we are very, very happy for this. Today, a context has been set in relation to a number of important matters that we have discussed. There is a clear roadmap forward. We have confidence in the programs and plans as outlined. They're multi-pronged, they're far-reaching, and we expect them to be effective in addressing the causal factors and ways of ensuring that disciplinary repercussions are understood by all as it relates to violence in schools. We look forward to continued dialogue and consultation, and we understand that persons appreciate the fact that safe and non-violent schools reflect safe, healthy, non-violent societies.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hyacinth Harris, President of the Association of Public Primary School Principals, and I want, as my colleagues did, to thank the Prime Minister and the Minister of Education for inviting us to this session. We acknowledge in APS that we've had several challenges with the physical plants in the primary schools. Many of them have been in deplorable conditions for some time, and we are pleased this afternoon to note that much of the expenditure will be targeted at the physical plants, improving the plants that our teachers, our principals, and our students function in. It is often very difficult to function effectively if you are uncomfortable, and so we are pleased that attention is being given to this area. We are especially pleased that Belmont Primary will be given some attention, because that is one of our primary schools that has been in a condition that was of concern for some time. We are also pleased this evening because the matter of aggression is being addressed. Oftentimes we see aggression being exhibited in the primary schools, and nothing happens until the students transition to secondary schools. But in all that has been said today, we acknowledge that attention will be given not only to the secondary schools, but we believe from the element of the student services, attention will also be given to the primary schools, and we look forward to that. We also look forward to any changes that will be made with regard to the curriculum in the future, because we also acknowledge that our students are not only academically inclined, but they also have skill sets in other areas, in the arts, and we hope that programs will be put in place to capture those students who are able to perform in those areas. We look forward to resources being placed in the primary schools to attend to the issues related to the arts, especially music and drama and the like. We are pleased this afternoon that going forward, we will have some collaboration with personnel from the Ministry of Education. We've heard that there will be a standing committee of key persons, and we look forward to be part of that standing committee. So once again, on behalf of the members of the Association of Public Primary School Principals, I want to say a heartfelt thank you for the opportunity to express our views here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've also agreed that we need to take control of how our schools look, and we need to start to landscape. It should not only be international schools that have beautiful grounds and nice trees and shade and fences that are landscaped rather than being link fences that are mashed up within a matter of weeks at great cost. I've never seen anybody run through Bougainvillea or Sweet Lime yet, and Bougainvillea thrives in the dry season to make it more encouraging for us to want to plant. And I've therefore asked the NCC to work with the Ministry of Education, but I'm conscious that the NCC and the Ministry of Education alone will not help, and therefore I'd like them to reach out also to all goodwill, people of goodwill, as well as companies of goodwill, to help us adopt schools in our communities and to want to landscape them. And I'd like simply to say two things. I want to talk directly to the parents. Our children are our blessings, and we have a responsibility to take care of them. You have to work with the teachers in the system, and we have to work together, families, schools, church, communities, because too many of our young people do not feel that they are loved or that they are being valued or that they are being supported. It is our responsibility to give them that, but also to teach them the most basic of lessons, that life is about choice. We choose every step that we make and every statement that we make, every word that we use, and everything that we choose has a consequence. if we work together to reinforce this in our children, we will win the battle. And to the children, I want to say to the children of this nation that know that you are blessed to be being brought up in a country that values you and that loves you. Yesterday I met with the doctors of this country, and we reflected that we spend between education and health almost $100,000 for every child that is born and gets to 18 years old in this country. There are very few other countries in the world that makes this kind of investment in its children. We love you, but loving you at the level of the country sometimes may feel to you that you're not feeling the love in your home or in your community. And sometimes if you're not feeling it, you have to find somebody to talk to. And as Santia said, talk it out. If you talk it out, trust me, there is no battle that you cannot overcome. But what we can't have is you feeling alone and then taking things into your own hands and lashing out at everybody. If somebody is bullying you, if somebody is unfair in you, find an adult to talk to about it. But what we can't have is you walking this journey of life alone, feeling unloved. And this country has shown it at a collective level. It is the rest of us now, your parents, your aunts, your godmother, your godfather, your uncles, to be able to reach out to you and let you know that all of us will always feel sad. All of us at some point will feel angry. All of us at some point will feel disappointed. But you don't let those things cause you to do the wrong thing or things that you will regret forever. So I hope that this is not a case of me alone talking, but I'm asking the rest of this country. We have a duty to lift up our children and to lift them up in a way that touches their hearts. Are there any questions?
What exactly is being done as it relates to the weapons entering the school compound? Students bring weapons on the school compounds. I know there in the past there have been talks about having metal detectors, police on school compound.
Look, we have not reached that stage in our society yet. And it is why we took the time to start to take and to ask questions. I'm not saying that it will never happen for people to bring weapons, but we are hoping and we are trying to do and use all resources available to us to ensure that we can minimize those examples of it. But we also accept that the day that we put metal detectors in the system, in the schools, we will have institutionalized it no different from penal institutions. I have chosen today to take the path of love and to reach out, but tough love. And we are prepared to take those who are creating problems and to bring them out of the system in order to work with them, to get them to understand. We don't live in a perfect world. But equally, if we abandon the effort and if we take disproportionate action, we will end up condemning ourselves to a sentence that was unintended.
Juanita Belgrave, Barbados advocate.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome back. It's so good to see you. Miss Santia. I'm kind of curious as to the decision of bringing in an extra guidance counselor, because I'm thinking of guidance counselor in the traditional sense where this is a person who guides your academic process. I remember we had a discussion a few months back about psychologists being in schools. Is there any consideration for that happening?
We took a decision to introduce the additional guidance counselor because there was a recognition that the number of problems that we were seeing in terms of children at risk, the one guidance counselor in the system was not adequate. And we decided that we wanted to have additional support for those persons. So that was the first issue in terms of priority. The second thing is that we have a number of additional support services that are provided to the Ministry of Education through non-governmental organizations providing funding for psychologists and in some cases social workers. And of course, we would love to have additional resources going in terms of psychologists. We don't have the funds right now to be able to do it, but we have been able to work with the other organizations to be able to supplement what the ministry doesn't have. So if you take, for example, Supreme Counseling, they have a team of, I think, 10 psychologists. They're in a number of schools presently, and they can do the assessments, and basically now we will work with the Ministry of Education to feed that information through the system so that we can provide that to the teachers and to the schools so they're in a better position to be able to respond to some of the problems that the children are having as well.
Anything else? I just want to end by saying that this has been a long week, and we have a long one next week again. Yesterday I met with doctors, and a week ago the QEH and the Ministry of Health for 6 hours. Yesterday with doctors for 4 hours. Because in a very real sense, as I keep saying for the last few months, almost every institution in this country has not fared well in the last decade. And we're literally trying to rebuild institutions from the police force to the health system to the educational system. On Monday, we meet with all of the water people and the engineers to deal with some issues there. And it is going to require, you're going to say not her again with it, it is going to require us to stay the course. Yesterday, we got good news in terms of how far we've come and what we're passing. But when I was asked if I was jubilant, I'm not, because I know what still lies ahead of us. And the one sure thing that I know is that I need the engagement of the majority of Barbadians on this effort. We're going to have to change how we do some things in this country. And it came up again today in education here with respect to how we deploy the workforce, with respect to the need for flexi time in some instances, because obviously you can't be cleaning at the same time as somebody's teaching. So do you deploy all of your janitors early, or do you have staggered hours so that persons can come and go, because just because you're a janitor doesn't mean you don't have business to do in town. It may be better that some people may want to go to town, do what they have to do, and come back in the afternoon, recognizing that they have to do some early cleaning and some late cleaning. I'm looking for my friend. So that the bottom line is that we have a public service that is still too rigid in too many things. And we have to have the courage to have the conversations, to change the things, to make it work for our children, our teachers, and our workers in general. And that is the kind of mature conversation that we will continue to have, not just in education, but across every sector. So a lot of what we will do is to share the rationale and the process and the conversation with the country, because it is only in carrying the country along that people are going to understand the need for transformational change in Barbados, and for us to agree that the common mission has to be sector by sector, group by group, for us to be the best that we can be, exhibiting excellence always. Thank you and good night.